I have been working on the trains in my remake of LEGO LOCO for a long time, and let me tell you, this was a bit of a nightmare. So the trains in LEGO LOCO are very simple. You spawn them out of the train depots and they move along the tracks as you'd expect. You can control them with the inspector to go forwards, backwards, stop in place, pretty basic stuff. When they come up to the train stations, they stop to allow passengers to get on and they carry on around the track. And they also do this for the post office in the game, collecting all of the postcards that you've made to send off to your friends or Eamon the skeleton. Why were they so bad to develop? Let's get into it. If you haven't seen the previous devlogs, the game's pathfinding is all done via a grid, with each tile using letters to determine whether or not a unit can move over it. For example, the minifigs all walk along paths, and these all use P as their key, so any square that currently contains a P is walkable. Same with the cars, any square that has the R key for road can be navigated. Perfect. The train tracks are the exact same. Any track uses the T key, and so this is what the train should be looking for. However, they move a lot differently to the minifigs or cars. Instead of just picking a random spot and drawing a path towards it, unsurprisingly, trains can only go forwards and backwards along the track. They're sort of confined to that. So I needed a new pathfinding script for the train's movement that uses a similar process to the others, except it simply finds the next tile along, either in front or behind the train, depending on its direction. This wasn't too bad of an issue because all I had to do was create a new function in the grid navigation class that simply gets a neighboring tile in a specific direction, so I pass in the train's current position, the direction it's moving, and the T key used to only find tracks, and then with a bit of vector number wizardry, it spits out either a valid tile and says that hey, you can move just fine, or if nothing is found, then returns null. If that's the case, the train just stops. That all seems simple enough, but it doesn't really work with how the trains move. Minifigs and cars both move in very rigid ways. They will only travel either vertically or horizontally, and never anything in between. So when they come to a corner, they turn sharply and carry on their path. But trains don't do this. When they come to a bend, they take them smoothly, updating the sprites along the way. And speaking of, let's look at these sprites, shall we? As a reference, when a car goes around a corner in the game, it updates the sprite 3 times. First at about a 30-degree angle, then at 60, then at 90 degrees to straighten out and drive along the next road. Very simple. And the minifigs don't have this at all. When they turn a corner, they instantly snap to their new direction. But I guess the developers thought the trains needed to be a little different. You see, what I think they did here was take stills of a rotating 3D model to accurately show the different angles. And how many sprites did they need in total? Well, it's a lot more than the cars, that's for sure. Each train comes with 128 different sprites to animate their rotation. 128. That's less than 3 degrees per sprite. Why did they make them so smooth? And what's funny is, these sprites are stored on a sprite sheet that's one continuous row, and there's some filler sprites on here as well. So the resolution of these images comes to 8,960 pixels wide by 56 pixels high. Simply ridiculous, but it made sense to the game, so I guess that's fine. Because the trains are just that smooth, they almost look out of place with the rest of the world, because everything else is this simple pixel art style with low frame rates, no tweening or anything else applied. And then the trains look like actual 3D models. It's an interesting style choice to say the least, and to be honest, this clash of styles is partly the reason why I decided that for my remake, I'm going to decimate these sprite sheets. Also because I don't feel like dealing with literally thousands of sprites. So what I've done is gone through each sprite sheet and deleted almost all of them, and only left behind 8 sprites for the carriages and 16 sprites for the locomotives. The carriages only need half the amount because their designs are symmetrical, whereas the locomotives obviously need to be pointing in the direction they're actually going. So after I got through with that, I set up a scriptable object for the train cars, which stores a list of their sprites from each angle, a single sprite which shows what they look like in the depot, and then a function that takes in a vector 2 for the direction and converts it into an angle, and then an index for the sprite list, and then finally returns the correct sprite for that direction. This function was actually rather easy to implement, but makes it look great. And as you can see from this little demo, it looks like the train is actually rotating. So I've got that working. Let's go back to the movement and break down what challenges I had there. The main thing I had to think about is whether or not the train cars move as a single unit or individually, and to achieve the movement, I had a few different methods in mind, and I tried to implement them to various levels of success. The first one I had in mind was to use a spline, with each car placed at a knot and then have an extra knot at the front and back for their alignment. Depending on the train's direction, the cars will point towards the next one in the line and move all together. This option basically also comes down to moving the spline as a single object or individually with the knots. You see, if I move the spline as a whole, I would have to align the knots based on the forward and backwards directions and basically rotate them around the transform. This is possible, but was a bit of a pain to get working, as the pathfinding has to store the location for the midpoint, the front, and the back. I'm sure I could have got this working nicely, but it just didn't seem right to me at the time. Moving the knots individually was also an option, and give each of them a location to move towards, but at that point I might as well just move the train cars themselves and remove the spline in general, which is what I did. I could have used Unity's physics system, and with the physics joints keep the train cars attached to each other, have them moving together as one object, but nothing else in the game uses physics and didn't seem like the right approach to me. What I finally settled on was a pretty simple solution, to be honest. I have the parent object, which contains a train controller. This handles the setup of each train car and also takes in the speed control from the inspector. It then tells all of the cars the speed and moves them at the same time. If one of the train cars tells the controller it can't move because there's an obstacle or no track, it stops all of them at once, which keeps the train together. Each train car has its own pathfinding system, which finds the next valid tile in the direction it's facing and moves it towards it. Initially, I had it simply set the direction to the next tile and move in a straight line, but it was a bit rigid and it didn't look perfect on the corners. For the sprite updating, I do have it coded to smoothly rotate, so it gets the direction it should be facing and then lerps from its current direction to the target, which gives it a more natural turning look. But if you stop the train while on a bend, you'll see that it's not actually on the track at all. I did add the lerping to the movement as well, so that the movement was curved, but to be honest, it looks sort of bad, and would also in some cases overshoot the turning and just spin on the spot forever, as it never reached its goal. So I reverted it back to just the visuals. Before I get into the problems I was having, let's talk about how the pathfinding actually works, and how it decides what tile to go for. So as I said earlier, the trains just need to find the next available tile in the direction they're facing, and move towards it. So there's no A-star pathfinding with scores or heuristics, it's just looking for the tile that's in front of them. To achieve this, I wrote a new function in the grid navigation that returns a valid neighbouring tile. How this works is it takes the position that the train car is currently in and adds the direction to it. This gives you the coordinate to check when rounded to the grid. I wrote out an explanation for this function, but I feel like it's just much too number talk for a video like this, so I'll keep it short. Basically, you need to check for 3 possible outcomes: the tile in front, tile to the left, and the tile to the right of the train. It does this in this order, and if it finds a valid tile at any point, it returns it and moves on. If nothing is found, then the train can't go anywhere and stops. So I had this working and the trains were moving around the track, but then I had a thought. Why am I checking for a new target every tile, when train tracks are just segments of straight lines? So instead of checking for the next neighbour in a direction, I added a while loop that checks every subsequent tile in that direction until it reaches the end of the valid tiles, and the final one it finds becomes the next target. This is a bit of optimization that isn't necessarily needed, but reduces the amount of checks overall and makes their targeting a little easier to use. So what problems did I face? Well, they find their target and start to move towards it. Once they get there, they repeat the cycle forever. It seems simple, but there's something in this code that results in an infinite loop that only rarely triggers. And I can't even really determine when it'll trigger because I'll run the game for ages, watch the trains move around the tracks, and after repeating the same actions over and over again without any input or anything, bang. The whole engine is non-responsive and I have to open Task Manager to shut it all down. One of my theories as to what it is that the trains reach their target and when looking for the next one, for some odd reason find the same target they're already at. Say they've arrived and just get stuck finding the same tile over and over again. But I've had it crash on a straight line when the pathfinding isn't even going on, so that doesn't make sense. It could be a case of the trains finding an invalid tile, telling the controller to stop the train, which then stops all of the cars, which then gets the trains to check for a tile, which is invalid, and yeah, just loops like that. But again, I put in safeguards for this exact issue, and nothing. I can't say for certain that this is where the issue lies. Ultimately, there's a bug in the trains that is still there, and will crash the engine when triggered, but it seems so random and rare. Hopefully I can find it, but I can't delay this video any longer than I already have, so it'll still cause me pain when I develop it some more. Another issue with the train, which I can technically ignore right now, is the fact that the trains don't care about orientation of the tracks, or what kind of track it's driving on, to be honest. If I place 2 tracks parallel to one another, the train can absolutely just jump across the rails, no problem. And if I have a bunch of straight tracks in a diagonal line, it'll just think it's a corner and turn like nothing's wrong. This is something I want to fix by adding some form of direction to the tiles, so you can only enter and exit in a specific orientation, but again, that's for a future update. Just having these trains in the game, moving around the track and turning as they do in the original was such a massive moment of relief for me. I worked on these things for days without any success, and finally implementing a system that actually looked good was just amazing, and I don't want to expand it too fast and break it all again. I want to spend a bit more time polishing everything and having it complete before adding the passenger or mail features, but they will be added, don't worry about that. Once I had the trains working, I started to design the train depot functions that I went over last episode, and the train depot looks a lot better than it did back then. If you haven't seen any of my shorts that I've been posting, check them out because they're amazing, but in one I covered the fact that GS, a member over on my Patreon, also check that out, left me a comment saying that the .but files in the game, which I assumed were metadata about the buttons, are actually just images, and if I rename the file extension, they just work. So I have all of the sprites for the UI, including the button press animations, and I don't have to remake anything at all. It's such a simple thing that I just never considered, because there's also bitmap files of some of the UI. So why are they in there twice? No idea, but they are. I'll just chalk it up to weird 90s game dev tricks. Once I prettied up the UI, I got to work on the functionality. Most of it was already in place. I had just had to swap out the list of sprites, it was randomly rolling, to a list of train cars instead, and output that to the spawn manager. This instantiates the trains just the same as the minifigs and other units, and originally I just spawned it at 0, just to test if everything was working, and then made sure that the trains spawn in and move immediately, so their speed is automatically set to 1. Once that was working fine, I added a spawn point to the depot so the train comes out of it, as well as a direction that the train should be facing when it spawns. However, I still need to work on the way that they leave and enter the depot. The trains, especially when made up of 4 cars, are clearly bigger than the depot they're entering, but I need a way for them to seamlessly drive in and out, without sticking out the back or thinking that they're still driving along tracks. What I have in mind is simply disabling the cars as they reach the inside of the building and enabling them again when leaving. I can then create a mask for the trains so they look like they're inside the walls, and job done. I haven't got around to this yet, but making it look nice is a second stage thing. Making it work was my focus right now. And that's basically how far I've gotten with the trains. They've still got a long way to go, but who would have thought that the part about making trains for a game about trains would take so long? But let's look at some of the other little bits that I've done recently. Now that I've got more of the UI sprites, I went back and changed all of the buttons that I could, from using Unity's default color tint interactions to sprite swaps with their standard, pressed and disabled sprites. This makes each button look so much nicer, and it's just a lot closer to the original. Such a small change, but really adds to the overall experience. One of the most impactful details that I needed to sort out for this game was the list of names for every single type of minifig. I started filling this out when I first set them up, copying them from the game, but then after changing some of the code around, they were wiped again. Now that the code is settled and I won't be changing anything, I can start to fill them out. And because coming up with hundreds of random names is actually quite tough, I put it to you lot to help me out. I posted a few shorts on YouTube and asked over on my Patreon about some of the names that you want to see in the game, and I got a lot of responses. Some of them were just regular names, some were references to other series, a few joke names were thrown in there, and a few that I clearly wasn't going to include, but after all of this, I had almost 200 names ready to be typed out. I got to work and the cities are now filled with so many characters. With every single update, this project is getting closer and closer to completion. But every time I think I'm getting there, I remember another detail that I completely glossed over, which adds even more time. Game dev is basically like running on a treadmill expecting to reach the end. You just gotta jump off at some point. But don't worry, I'm gonna get this done, and next time I think I'm gonna look at some of the buildings in the game that have extra interactions, like the painter, which is a massive one where you can make beautiful postcards using a bunch of clip art, and then go off to the post office to sort that mail. So that's something to look forward to for next time. But for now, let's check in with everyone's favourite, Subscriber Wars. Here we are back in the arena with a new VIP entering the fray, Clayton Belcher here. If you want to become a VIP in the arena, consider supporting the channel here on YouTube by becoming a member or supporting me over on Patreon. But that's enough shameless plugs, let's get this battle started. Already a huge scrap in the middle here with some notable names like Tom Proudfoot and Mark Davis. Lots of competitors are falling already, thinning out the numbers. There's fights going on all over the place. Who's going to come out on top? We're down to the final zone here, everyone is low on health. We got Lon going up against Bobby in the final fight. They're both hanging on. Here we go, and Lon takes the win this time around. What a great battle. Well done, Lon. And that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I've been getting a lot of love on my LEGO Loco stuff recently. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave a like and comment down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Maybe go and check out my Patreon. It's completely free to join, and I post occasional updates there before anywhere else. And I hope you're enjoying the development of this iconic game as much as me. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.